One man stole $7 million, bought a surface-to-air missile, fired it at FBI headquarters, and was never caught. He spent 32 years on the FBI's most wanted list. The list that was supposed to stop him was born from a casual lunch conversation, and it has no number one. By minute 12, the full story of that missile and the man who walked free for 3 decades. Here is what a life looks like at every level of being hunted. The FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list is one of the most recognized law enforcement tools in American history. Its image is everywhere: post office walls, television broadcasts, film scripts, but almost everything the public believes about how it works is wrong. The mechanics behind it are stranger, more fragile, and far more human than the mythology suggests. But that is not even the strangest part. To understand the list, a viewer must begin not in a courtroom or a field office, but at a lunch table in Washington, D.C. in late 1949. International News Service journalist William Kinsey Hutchinson sits across from J. Edgar Hoover and between courses asks a casual question: who are the toughest guys the FBI is currently chasing? Hoover answers. Hutchinson publishes the story. The public response is immediate and overwhelming. Readers write in. Tips flood the bureau. Hoover, who understands publicity the way a general understands terrain, recognizes what has happened. A throwaway conversation over a meal has accidentally created one of the most effective manhunt tools in American law enforcement history, and he moves to institutionalize it immediately. On March 14, 1950, the FBI officially launches the 10 Most Wanted Fugitives program. The first list includes bank robbers, car thieves, and violent offenders. There is no ceremony, there is no ranking system, there is no number one. The Bureau simply releases 10 names, assigns each an identification order number, and waits. What follows over the next 7 decades will surprise even the people who built it. The identification order is the foundational document of the system. Each fugitive receives a number, a photograph, a physical description, and a summary of their crimes. These orders are printed and distributed to post offices, courthouses, and law enforcement agencies across the country. The logic is simple. If enough people see enough faces, someone will recognize one. The system is essentially a nationwide neighborhood watch built on paper and trust. What happens at minute 12 is what this video was built for. But first, something the evening news has been getting wrong since 1950. Every major news broadcast that has ever announced a new addition to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list has at some point called that person the new number 1 most wanted fugitive in America. Anchors say it confidently, reporters repeat it. The phrase has entered the language as established fact. It is not. The FBI has never ranked the list. Every slot is structurally identical. There is no number 1, there never has been. The entire ranking system is a media invention with no basis in bureau policy or procedure. The FBI has been quietly aware of this misrepresentation for decades and has done essentially nothing to correct it. The reason is not incompetence. The reason is that the myth serves the bureau. A number 1 most wanted fugitive generates fear, urgency, and public attention in a way that fugitive number 7 never will. The misrepresentation is inconvenient to correct and useful to leave alone. The first test of the list's actual power comes almost immediately. Within the first year of the program's operation, several fugitives are captured directly as a result of citizen tips generated by the identification orders. The Bureau tracks these closures carefully. The data is encouraging. Ordinary people with no law enforcement training are proving to be effective assets, not because they are brave or specially motivated, but simply because they have seen a face on a wall. The geography of recognition matters enormously in these early years. A fugitive who moves from Chicago to rural Georgia may believe distance has made him invisible, but the identification order has moved with him, pinned to the wall of the post office where he buys his stamps, displayed in the courthouse where he files paperwork for a used car. The system is not intelligent. It is simply everywhere. That ubiquity is its core strength. In 1953, a fugitive named Courtney Townsend Tate is added to the list. Tate is dangerous, armed, experienced, and by all available evidence fully prepared to shoot it out with whatever law enforcement comes for him. He has made this clear through his behavior and through statements to associates. When agents close in, the conventional expectation is violence. What actually happens is something else entirely. In a moment, the newspaper that changed everything. Tate reads his own story. Sitting somewhere in 1953, Courtney Townsend Tate picks up a newspaper carrying an Associated Press dispatch about his addition to the most wanted list. He reads the story. He reads his own name, his own description, the charges against him. Something in the act of seeing himself through the Bureau's eyes, reduced to a number, a photograph, a set of crimes, shifts his calculation. He puts down the paper and surrenders peacefully to authorities. Not a shot is fired. The Tate case becomes a quiet proof of concept inside the Bureau. The list is not just a manhunt tool. It is a psychological instrument. The act of publicizing a fugitive's existence, naming him, numbering him, circulating his face, can itself alter his behavior. A man who planned to die in a firefight decides, upon reading about himself, that he would rather live. The paper on the post office wall does something that a loaded weapon cannot always accomplish. By the mid-1950s, the list has developed its own internal culture. Bureau agents begin tracking not just captures, but the manner of captures, which fugitives surrendered, which were taken in the field, which were turned in by family members, which were recognized by strangers. The patterns are instructive. A significant percentage of early captures come from people who know the fugitive personally. The list does not just find strangers. It pressurizes the fugitive's entire social network. The identification order system creates a particular kind of paranoia in fugitives who understand how it works. Every former associate becomes a potential informant. Every trip to a public building carries risk. Every new acquaintance is a stranger who might have been in the right post office on the right day. The fugitive does not know who has seen his face. That uncertainty, that permanent not knowing, is by design. It is the psychological tax the Bureau levies on anyone who makes the list. In 1957, FBI agents in an unnamed city are investigating a tip about a fugitive named Emmett Corrigan Embry. Embry has been on the list long enough for his identification order to have circulated widely. A citizen recognizes him and calls the Bureau. Agents move to make the arrest. What they find when they arrive defies almost any reasonable expectation of how a manhunt is supposed to end. Emmett Corrigan Embry is lying underneath a car, fixing a radiator. The car belongs to the arresting agents. Embry, not knowing who owns the vehicle, has done a passing stranger a favor with a wrench. He is arrested mid-repair, grease on his hands, by the men whose radiator he has just serviced. The citizen tip that led agents to him had come from someone who recognized his face from the post office wall in his neighborhood. The system worked exactly as designed. The arrest looks like a comedy. It is not. The Embry case illustrates something the Bureau understands well but rarely states publicly. Most fugitives are not criminal masterminds. They are people who have committed serious crimes and are now trying, with varying degrees of competence, to live ordinary lives. They need mechanics, groceries, housing, employment. Every ordinary transaction is a potential exposure. The list does not need to be everywhere. It only needs to be in the places ordinary life requires. What comes next changes the scale of everything. Through the 1960s and 1970s, the 10 Most Wanted list expands its cultural footprint. Newspapers run regular features on list editions. Television news treats each new placement as a significant story. The fugitives themselves begin to function as characters in a national narrative, villains whose files are public, whose crimes are documented, whose captures are followed as ongoing serials. The Bureau does nothing to discourage this. The coverage is free, it is nationwide, and it works. The list also begins to reveal the limits of its own power. Some fugitives remain on it for years, some for decades. The cases that drag on longest share a common feature. The fugitive has left the country, or has a support network disciplined enough to keep secrets, or has simply vanished into a population large enough to absorb one more ordinary face. The list is powerful within the United States. Outside its borders, it is largely symbolic. In 1983, a 24-year-old Wells Fargo security guard named Victor Manuel Gerena walks into a Hartford, Connecticut depot carrying a handgun. He ties up two coworkers sedates them with injections, and loads $7.1 million in cash into a waiting car. It is, at that moment, the largest cash robbery in United States history. Jarana drives away and does not stop. He is placed on the 10 most wanted list within weeks. The Bureau is confident the case will close quickly. It does not, but before the full account of what Jarana does with that money and what it means for the list itself, there is something you need to understand about how the system handles fugitives it cannot reach. The Bureau has a category it does not publicize. It is not a formal designation. It is a practical reality. Fugitives who are believed to be outside U.S. jurisdiction, living under the protection of a foreign government, effectively beyond the reach of American law enforcement by any lawful means available. These cases do not close. They accumulate. The list absorbs them and continues. The Bureau updates the file and waits. Jarana's $7.1 million does not sit in a bag. It moves. A significant portion of it reaches Puerto Rican independence organization Los Macheteros, who had helped plan and execute the robbery. The Macheteros use part of the proceeds to purchase weapons. Among those weapons is a surface-to-air missile. On October 30, 1983, weeks after the robbery, that missile is fired at FBI headquarters in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The building takes damage. No agents are killed. Jarana is already gone. The missile attack on the FBI's own headquarters using money stolen by a man on the FBI's own most wanted list is by any measure an extraordinary operational failure. The Bureau pursues Jarana aggressively for years. Extradition requests are made to Cuba, where he is believed to have fled. Cuba does not comply. The file stays open. The years accumulate. The list keeps his name. 1 year becomes 5, 5 becomes 10, 10 becomes 20. 32 years, remember that number. The legal architecture around the most wanted list is less dramatic than the public imagines. A listing is not an arrest warrant by itself, though it is typically accompanied by one. The Bureau cannot legally compel foreign governments to extradite. It cannot operate unilaterally on foreign soil without host nation consent. The list is a pressure instrument. It signals priority. It generates public attention. It motivates cooperation. Against a government that has decided to shelter a fugitive, it generates nothing but paperwork. Cuba's relationship with American fugitives in this era is not accidental. Several prominent American fugitives, including Assata Shakur, are known to be living in Cuba with government protection. American extradition requests are ignored as a matter of policy. The FBI continues to list these individuals, continues to update their files, continues to issue statements. The statements produce no arrests. The listing persists not because it is effective, but because closing a file without resolution is politically and institutionally unacceptable. Inside the Bureau, the Most Wanted list has a selection committee that meets regularly to evaluate candidates for placement and removal. The criteria for addition are specific. The subject must be considered dangerous, there must be an active federal warrant, and critically, the Bureau must believe that publicity will actually help. This last criterion is more consequential than it appears. It means the list can reject the most famous criminals in the world if their fame has already made the publicity redundant. In the early 2000s, the Bureau is asked, in various public forums, why Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the most powerful drug cartel leader in the Western Hemisphere, wanted on multiple federal charges, has never appeared on the 10 most wanted list. The answer the Bureau gives is precise and revealing. El Chapo is already too famous. Placing a household name on the list would, in the Bureau's own words, be a waste of publicity. The list is not for people the public already knows. It is for people the public needs to meet. Same logic, applied differently, explains the absence of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, from the 10 most wanted list during his 17-year mail bombing campaign. The reason Kaczynski never appeared is not that the Bureau failed to take him seriously. It is that the Bureau did not identify him as a specific suspect until just months before his 1996 arrest. There was no individual face to publicize. The list requires a name. Without a name, there is nothing to list. A man named Ralph Cato discovers his own identification order before the Bureau is ready for him to see it. Cato has been approved for placement on the 10 most wanted list. The press release is prepared. The date is set. But Cato, somewhere in Cleveland, encounters his own order before the scheduled publication date. He does not run. He walks into an FBI field office and surrenders. The press release is never issued. Cato technically never appears on the public list. He is the only man on record to be removed from the 10 most wanted before anyone knew he was on it. The Cato case exposes a structural vulnerability in the system's design. The identification order must be distributed before the press release to ensure agents are prepared. That pre-release distribution creates a window in which the fugitive might encounter his own documentation. The Bureau knows this. It accepts the risk because the alternative, distributing orders only after the public announcement, would leave agents unprepared. Every system has a seam. This one has always been there. The strangest capture is still ahead. By the 1990s, the list has generated more than 400 captures since its 1950 founding. The Bureau publicizes this number regularly. What it publicizes less frequently is the denominator, the total number of individuals ever placed on the list, and the percentage of cases that have never closed. The capture rate is high by any reasonable standard, but the failures, the cases that remain open indefinitely, reveal the precise shape of the system's outer boundary. The fugitives who survive longest on the list share a profile. They have international connections. They have access to resources sufficient to maintain a false identity across years or decades. They have, crucially, a support structure, people who know who they are and have decided, for political or personal reasons, that this knowledge will not be shared with American law enforcement. The list can find a man eating at a diner in Omaha. It cannot find a man whose entire community has agreed to protect him. The Bureau periodically removes fugitives from the list without public capture. This happens for several reasons: death, incapacitation, or in rare cases, a prosecutorial decision that the case no longer justifies the resource expenditure. These removals are quiet. They do not generate press releases. The fugitive's file is updated. The slot is filled with a new name. The public rarely notices. The mythology of the list depends on the impression that every case eventually closes. In December 2016, Victor Manuel Gerena is removed from the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. No arrest has been made, no extradition has been secured, no body has been found. He has spent 32 years on the list, longer than almost any other fugitive in its history. He is believed to be alive. He is believed to be in Cuba. The FBI issues no statement explaining the removal. The case does not close. It simply stops being listed. The removal of Gerena's name does not mean the Bureau has stopped looking. It means the Bureau has made a calculation. Keeping his name on the list serves no further investigative purpose. The publicity has long since peaked. The diplomatic channels have been exhausted. The listing has become a monument to an unresolved case rather than an active manhunt tool. Removing it is not surrender. It is, in the Bureau's institutional logic, a form of accuracy. What the Gerena case reveals about the list is what the list has always been but rarely admits. It is a tool with a specific range. Within that range, domestic fugitives, mobile populations, criminals without state protection, it is extraordinarily effective. Beyond that range, internationally sheltered fugitives, state actors, individuals whose entire environment is hostile to American law enforcement. It produces file updates and press statements and very little else. The mythology obscures this boundary. The cases that linger on the list are its honest edges. The Bureau has added more than 500 individuals to the 10 most wanted list since March 14, 1950. More than 90% of them have been captured or are confirmed deceased. The cases that remain open are not failures of will or even of capability. They are cases that have crossed outside the territory where the list's mechanics function. The system is powerful. It is not unlimited. The gap between those two things is where the most interesting stories live. A casual lunch conversation in 1949 built a system that has run continuously for over 70 years. That system has no number one. The ranking every news anchor announces has never existed. At its lowest level, a face on a post office wall nobody reads. At its highest, 32 governments, decades of pursuit, and still a man who fired a missile at the Bureau's own headquarters lived freely in Cuba until his name was quietly removed in December 2016. The question the Bureau has never answered: what does it mean when the most wanted list simply stops wanting someone? Leave that answer in the comments.